I guess I should start off by saying that I had my very own co-living space for 2.5 years. It was small, but I would consider it my MVP into the industry of co-living. I attained superhost status and consistently ran a successful business. I don't run that business anymore, but I have been staying in co-living spaces since then, and at the time of writing this, I am I am currently staying in a co-living space. Co-living impacts many people. Not only does it impact the residents themselves, but it also impacts the neighborhoods where they are located. Their mere presence impacts people far and wide. What I want to do here is talk about the downsides to co-living. This is the anti-co-living argument, and here they are. Number one, first of all, exclusivity runs deep in co-living. In my experience, I've noticed that co-living spaces have a very particular barrier to entry. Most of the time, the barrier to entry is mostly financial, and people without much money can't live there. There are other barriers to entry, the next one being the language that the people speak there. Depending on where the co-living space is located, you're going to notice that one language usually prevails. It can be frustrating to live in a co-living space where everyone around you is speaking a language you don't understand. Number two, humans are emotional creatures. And the thing about co-living is that you're going to be dealing with humans and subsequently their very irrational emotional outbursts. These can happen at any time over anything in any number of ways. Something as simple as dirty dishes can trigger a resident to throw a fit just because they're having a bad day. The most difficult thing about this is that if a crew member doesn't handle the situation, then it will only get worse. That crew member will likely incur some emotional trauma, as is normal. That is part of the job. Number three, locals are affected too. Most of the time, co-living spaces attract travelers. Also known as digital nomads, the locals will start experiencing some unfortunate effects of increased demand in local real estate. When more people move into a city, the prices for pretty much everything slowly goes up. This is only exacerbated by the fact that many co-living spaces can attract people with more disposable income than the locals. People with more disposable income will be willing to pay more for goods and services, so prices will slowly creep up in every industry. This is usually a trend that a growing city goes through. Local residents may even be priced out of their neighborhood and be forced to move out of the city due to rising living costs. Number four, residents of co-living tend to stick around for a while. Depending on the co-living space, a resident can end up staying for more than you might expect from a foreigner in your country. Imagine the picture where a foreigner is walking around your city, stuck in their own bubble, and they don't even speak the local language. One day, they're going to need something from a local market, and they won't even be able to ask for the basic things like bread or butter. Number five, it's important to note that co-living is not for everyone. In fact, it's only for a very small percentage of people. Most people are simply not qualified in some way or another. They are probably reliant on some form of help or support, and it doesn't make sense logistically. Maybe they're simply comfortable and they don't want to make the change of going to a co-living space. Since co-living means interacting with other humans, a resident needs to be sociable. They should be able to interact normally with other humans and communicate like normal people do. People who are used to being isolated will struggle with co-living spaces. These people usually come with habits, routines, or rituals that are not very compatible with co-living spaces. Sometimes, you can encounter people who will be a bad influence in one way or another. A resident will need to know how to understand this eventuality and handle it accordingly. This isn't something that everyone can do. Number six, there is potential that co-living could very well increase your cost of living. When living in a co-living space, it is more tempting to take on the habits of those around you. This can include their spending habits. It may even be more logistically difficult to reduce your expenses. Some co-living spaces don't have the local infrastructure to allow one effectively to do their own shopping and cooking. Shopping can be relatively more difficult if you're used to cars transporting everything for you. It can be quite the burden to carry around heavy bags of groceries, especially when you also need to shop for other people. Number seven, germs can spread more easily. Since co-living means that you'll be interacting with more people, you are also more likely to spread germs. Imagine that you're sitting around the dinner table and you're just having a few drinks with some residents, like in this picture. The proximity to each other in that scenario is definitely not social distancing approved. Number 8. You might take the brunt of others' blunders. Maybe someone left their milk slightly open and it drips all over your food. Maybe someone didn't close the fridge all the way and now the freezer is full of water. Maybe someone spilled water on some slippery floor and you take a tumble. It's an eventuality that you will be the unlucky individual with a short stick at some point. Number 9. The whole idea with co-living is that it's supposed to make it easy to move in and out. It's supposed to be a low commitment option to living. Sometimes it ends up being more of a hassle. Maybe the new apartment hasn't been cleaned in ages and you have no cleaning equipment to do it yourself. Maybe the insulation is terrible and you have to pay a ton for heating. For whatever reason, you may find yourself having to deal with an unpleasant scenario, and it might not be worth it to take the long-term solution. Speaking of long-term, you might be tempted to see things from a short-term perspective. It is quite common practice for co-living residents to hop from one co-living space to another. As a result, they might face some international restrictions and be allowed to stay for only up to 90 days at a time. When a resident knows this, they look at things from a very short-term perspective. In the short term, some decisions would simply make more sense if a long-term approach was taken. Not only will this affect the way you make decisions, but it will really influence how you interact with other people. You might end up communicating more bluntly, where maybe someone ends up feeling a bit uncomfortable. You don't care that you speak your mind, because you're leaving soon anyway. Number 11. Once you encounter enough people, you might end up feeling a sort of indifference when interacting with new people. The novelty of meeting a new person loses its appeal, and you slowly become more robotic with the people that come and go in your life. The people around you end up being a revolving door of humans in your life without enough consistency. Eventually, maybe you stop asking people how long they're staying in the city. Number 12. Some things are not up to your standards. It can be incredibly frustrating when you spend lots of time in a place and there are some things that aren't done well around you. Maybe you're a clean freak and there's a bunch of dust in the common space. Maybe you're a designer and the colors clash. Whatever the reason, you may encounter something that simply grinds your gears each and every day. Number 13. Expectations can be wrong. Just like getting catfished, the pictures online can tell a whole different story. Maybe the pictures were beautiful, but they intentionally left out some really ugly parts of the experience. You expect one thing, and when you encounter reality, it is so different that you just lose your mind. Number 14. It's like gambling with your accommodation. If you're into gambling and taking these kind of risks, co-living is like doing that with a very large part of your life. You spend a very large percentage of your time in the building where you sleep, so making a commitment based on something you saw online can be quite risky. As mentioned before with expectations, maybe the real experience is so different that your bet doesn't pay off. Number 15. You may be tempted to make a more long-term commitment, but you just can't stay for whatever reason. Maybe you have to go visit your family for the holidays or your visa restrictions limit your stay. For whatever reason, you may have to simply leave and you know that you won't come back for a while. You may have become attached to the place and you don't want to leave. You are thinking about the future and how you're going to leave behind something that you just started getting attached to. You just spent so much time developing connections with these people and then you leave it all behind. It's tempting to just sever ties with these people and these places. Maybe interacting with them just opens up old wounds. Maybe you just got into a good exercise routine at the local gym and now you've got to build that up all over again in a new place. Number 16. You have to deal with a problem that you simply did not have before. Maybe the air quality is simply worse than what you're used to, or the internet infrastructure sucks. What used to be a non-issue in the past is now a daily struggle. Whether co-living is more good than bad is another argument. I hope that my anti-co-living argument helped provide you with valuable insight from this perspective. Thank you.